we keep having people attacking us, I guess.
Oh, that's good. It shows they're paying attention.
McKeegan and stuff like that. What they really need to do is getting an education before they open their mouths up, because they're tripping over their own feet all the time. Googling a bit of information and putting it up as fact is just nonsense, right? They think it's okay. They think they've done the right thing.
Well, of course they do. Don't know any better, do they? You know, they put out what's on Wikipedia or on some website somewhere and say, look, I proved you wrong, you idiots. No, you haven't. You just demonstrated your own incompetence.
Yeah, I wonder what they're going to do with all the scrap metal they've got at NASA. They're tearing these gigantic platforms apart.
Oh, I'm sure they'll find a use for it. You know.
Well, I'm just looking at NASA reusing their equipment. There's the two different pages there. One's on the reuse of it. And I mean, they've already dismantled the space shuttle equipment, so they're dismantling those because they claim they have no more use for them. Well, what are they launching if you can't take it out to the launch pad? They're apparently building a new one for the SLS, but everything else is being leased out to Boeing now.
Yeah, NASA are very good at spending other people's money.
Yeah, well, Boeing's into aircraft. Like I said, if you look on the report server, there's a whole lot of documentation on Boeing and the next generation of commercial aircraft, right?
Yeah.
That they're working on engines and everything else, right, that they're doing. But when you see them just tearing this stuff down, sure as hell doesn't look like they're going to do a moon launch here, because, I mean, whose pad are they going to use? Musk's is complete toast, right?
It's just another excuse to delay the inevitable.
Oh, of course. They'll throw a political angle at it, or they'll throw this at it or that at it, anything, right? Or the weather isn't good enough today. Space weather.
Well, they haven't trained people well enough, so they've got to go back to the beginning and start again.
Yeah. Yeah, the space weather is going to be a problem for them, because just in the last week I was looking at the CMEs, and we're getting up into our level of CMEs now. They're listed like 1 to 5, like tornadoes, like, right? And it's not only that, it's whether it's directed at the Earth. Last week we had a couple of them that were hitting 2.1 and pointed straight at the Earth. So we've had spectacular northern lights and everything else because of them. We're coming up to a peak in 2025, so I don't see where they're going to have a lot of space to be doing a lot of launches, manned or unmanned.
They should have worried about that during Apollo. 1969 was the height of that cycle of solar activity. But
yeah, 69 to 72 was right in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it didn't seem to worry them at all. Because they didn't go anywhere. That's why it didn't worry them. They knew they weren't going anywhere. But they told us we were. So we all believed what they said. Start looking at the facts and get the details, and you realize they couldn't possibly have done it.
When the U.S. puts out statistics on who believes that they landed on the moon or not, I think they're using maybe 20 or 30-year-old statistics. What is there currently today?
The current figure is about 50%. That's in the UK. We're real supporters of the space program.
Yeah, I saw 57% for the UK that don't believe that anybody landed. And I don't think Canada is any different in that aspect. And the rest of the world simply don't believe it happened. Only the US.
Well, they have to, because it's part of the national psyche that they landed humans on the moon and beat Russia to doing it. That's the story that they all want to believe, which is fine if it was true. It's not true. Did you see this story about the retired head of the Russian space program?
Yeah, I did. I've watched it on several different channels.
Yeah, there's several different reports of it. Basically, it's the same as being head of NASA in terms of influence. And he just asked a reasonable question. He said, can anybody give me information about Americans landing on the moon? Oh, yes, they said, we've got a book about it. That was Dave Scott's book, written with Alexei Leonov. And he said they went to the moon, so they must have done, if he said so. Astronauts don't lie, do they? Believe that, you believe anything. So he's still looking for it, and he can't find it. He can't find any evidence that America landed humans on the lunar surface when they said they did.
Well, if anybody was going to have any information, considering the fact that Russia and the US have shared a lot of technology, especially with the ISS and everything else, you think that they would have enough information from the US to show that, yes, we did land on the moon.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
They would have the data. They would be sharing that information and the technology, the spacesuits, everything else, right?
Yeah, of course they would. They'd be proud of it. They'd say, look, this is what we've done. This is how we did it. This is where we landed. You can see the pictures.
But when the head guy from Russia says, well, we don't have any data from them.
Yeah.
Like if they can't get it when they're sharing information back and forth and US is using Russian rockets for all these years, right? That kind of stuff. There's got to be something up. They should actually have that information there. Same with the other projects, the Google X prizes, right, that were put on. If that information was there, and that's every major country in the world involved in the space program were involved in that, somebody could have picked the phone up and said, well, let's make this happen. If any country would have had the capability of making that happen, that would have shown up in that contest.
Yeah, of course they would.
When I was looking at the other people going through, it's funny that Dave McKeegan's site, when you do Moon Hoax, his is the first one on the list that's coming up.
Yeah, and ours isn't. You know, when I take the remote control and you say, Apollo detectives, all of a sudden up comes McKeegan, but you cannot find us in there. So I kept on resetting it, shutting it off, off, on, off. Finally, after 3-4 times, you know, Apollo detective shows up.
Nobody will get it on the first search.
And not even the second. You won't get it on the second either.
And then you see people going, oh, my subscribe button is grayed out. I can't subscribe to you.
That's right, yeah.
You can't turn on the notices. You're not getting my notices turned on, of course, and it doesn't come up. Might come up a week later. I mean, they're really trying to suppress the stuff.
But people will find it. You know that famous phrase, build it and they will come. That's what's happening. Because people are interested. They're seeing all the failures going on. They see NASA really not doing particularly well at the moment. They see SpaceX having a bit of a problem. And they say, well, let's find out what's going on. What do other people think about this? And they'll eventually find Apollo detectives. They will get there.
I mean, look at where all of your videos went to, Marcus, that were out there, that were 750,000 or more on the views. And then all of a sudden they're just wiped right off. You can't find them anywhere.
Yeah, that was done in July 2019. That's when it happened.
Yeah, just before the 50th anniversary.
That's right.
How convenient.
They put a huge suppression on everybody. That's why you see they put videos up and the comments are turned off because they don't want the negative. I was looking at one and I forget, he had over 1 million subscribers on the channel, and within a couple of days there was like 3,500 views on it. There's only 23 comments, all of them very positive. Obviously, all of the other negative ones were removed. Because if you have 3,500 views, you're going to at least have 100 comments.
Yeah.
So he only had 23 out of all those people that agreed with him. The rest would be going, you're an idiot, you're this, you're that, right?
It's basically outright censorship. That's what it's going to. Latest edition of Spaceflight. They stopped talking about Artemis. They're now talking about space elevators.
That's never going to happen.
We have the technology. And Starliner is supposed to launch in July, according to Spaceflight.
Really? Just hook an extra couple of Tesla's batteries up to it and away they go, eh?
Absolutely, yeah. And has the Tesla arrived at Mars yet? You know, the one that Elon Musk launched?
Well, I thought it was going by Mars to the sun.
That's why the cameras went off.
They say they're going to do it, and if they say they're going to do it, it must be true, because they said it.
That's how it's always worked.
Yeah, that's basically how Apollo worked. They're still producing films about Apollo now.
Robert and I were discussing the physical properties of a cartoon. And when they have certain properties, like when a character takes off, right, his eyes might hang back or his tongue. When he stops, his teeth fall. They go out in the ear, everything springs out, right? Those are physical properties of a cartoon, right? You run off a cliff and you keep running until you look down. You don't fall until then. And of course, you always have an umbrella or something with you, or a sign that goes, oop. Those are all properties of a cartoon. And when you put an Acme sticker on it, Acme Corporation, the Wile E. Coyote's using, right? This thing always comes back and bites him in the ass. It never works out right. You take that Acme sticker and just replace it with NASA. You put a NASA sticker on it, it takes off the ground as soon as it's out of sight, then everything works perfectly from there.
Of course it does.
And that's exactly, they created those properties of space. The idea that if you're in space, you're floating. It doesn't matter how they portray it, you're floating.
Yeah, because how they portray it is how people will perceive it.
That's right. And they gave it an effect to give you the imagination that they're in space. So they have this zero gravity simulator that they're building now. They're still going at the same process to do that. All of that stuff is there in their aspect. They eliminate anything that could be hazardous in spaceflight.
Yeah.
They negate it, whether it's vacuum, radiation, anything else. The consumables, they can carry as much as they want, anywhere they want to go. They never run out of the consumables, whether it be oxygen, fuel, battery power, anything. They always have enough. And Apollo shows that distinctly. I mean, they had a whole bunch more weight to the vehicle. It only had 30 seconds of fuel left on the first time. And then the next time, they got a whole lot more because they're going to stay 3 more days, throw a rover on and everything else. You've got at least a couple of metric tons more, just because of the rover and the battery power they need. Never mind the oxygen and all the other stuff.
Don't ask embarrassing questions. You're not supposed to ask questions like that because NASA have worked it all out, so they must have got it right. Start asking questions and look at the mathematics of it and the amount of fuel needed for the extra weight. Where did they put it? No, you're not supposed to ask questions like that.
Now they're going on with the fact that, if they're going to travel and they're going to use the moon as a kickoff station, right? It's going to be refueling, it's going to be whatever. Well, of course, all of a sudden, the moon now needs dihydrogen monoxide. And they're discovering dihydrogen monoxide on the moon all the time, more and more and more. And dihydrogen monoxide is nothing more than water. If you look up dihydrogen monoxide, Google it, and it just says, well, it's water, right? Yeah. But you'd think they'd at least use the technical term.
That would only embarrass people who didn't know what they were talking about.
And we know that it's not going to be there, considering that the surface of the moon is above the boiling point of water. And even if it wasn't, the vacuum's going to take it away anyway.
Yeah.
Right? And then they say, it's frozen in the caps. Well, yeah, it's going to off-gas slower when it's in ice form because of the vacuum. It's still going to disappear. It's going to dissipate anyway. They keep including that. And of course, there's no way we can go and stand there and say, yes, it's there. No, it's not there. But physics tell us that it can't be there. So now they're teaching back to the schools. They're teaching people at MIT, there's water on the moon. Well, it must have a different property than when you put it in a vacuum chamber here.
Oh, it has a very different property.
Obviously, because it's in space, it's completely different than whatever we do here. That's the same as at Sandusky. All those tests that show all of that equipment, all of the material testing they did there, of the materials breaking down. As soon as you go to space, they don't.
Yeah, but don't forget, they're referring to it as hydrogen monoxide, and that's a very different chemical formula, according to them, than water.
They don't refer to it as that. NASA has never referred to it as that. I just happened to trip across it the other day. Definition of water, and it said dihydrogen monoxide. And I went, that's a technical thing. NASA never uses that. Like they call regolith, which is just dirt. The Earth has regolith as well.
Here is a question which us space enthusiasts should be able to answer immediately. Can you name the 4 astronauts assigned to the Artemis 2 project? One's a Canadian.
Now, isn't one a woman as well?
Yes, one's a woman. And there's a black guy as well. There they are. Look, nice picture. Artemis 2 crew chosen. Oh, how many people can name them? We could all name Armstrong, Aldrin, Collins, Al Bean, Dave Scott, Gene Cernan. We could all name them, but can you name the Artemis crew? No, probably not.
Well, the ones that make it to the lunar surface will be remembered.
That's way in the future.
Yeah, like try 2035.
I know. It's a bit sad, really. I mean, how long did Apollo take from standing start to landing?
10 years?
Yeah, 10 years tops. For the time Kennedy made the announcement in 1961 to the time they landed in 1969, about 8 years.
I think all of the names are hilarious.
Why is that?
First person of color is Victor Glover, and I keep thinking of OJ and the glove.
Oh, Danny Glover.
I'm sure he's a very good astronaut and he's trained very well.
Yeah, and the first woman, they had to coach her to get on. So her name is Christina Koch. Reed Wiseman is the mission commander. He's the Wiseman, so he's the commander. And of course, the Canadian guy is Jeremy Hansen, so he's the handsome guy on the crew.
You're being very cynical there, Scott.
Well, I thought all of them just struck a chord with it as being quite comical.
Interesting connections.
Like I said, it also has a flight path here that doesn't show them going over the pole. It just shows them going out through the belts as well for Artemis 2.
They can't go to the pole.
I just got an image of the flight path here.
Yeah, they go from Florida over to Africa. It's straight round. It's not going straight up.
Oh yeah, but they can turn north anytime they want. They just turn the wheel a little bit.
You jest, sir.
It's like driving a Chevrolet.
You don't have steering wheels on a spacecraft. You don't have brakes.
These ones do when they just turn north and go over the pole and then turn again to go back towards the moon. There's the flight path right out through the middle section of the Van Allen belts to and back.
Yep, of course it is. It's the only way you can get there, assuming you can.
That is always the biggest question for me.
Yeah, they haven't done it yet, so how are they going to start doing it now? Unmanned craft can be protected. But humans, us delicate little creatures here, we've got to have an awful lot of protection to make sure that we get through the Van Allen belts and out into space beyond.
Unmanned can be very much lighter because they don't have to have all the consumables to keep people alive.
That's true, yeah.
So you can accelerate them and whatever, and they can be autonomous now and have their own guidance systems to get them there.
Yep.
Even if we lose communication with them, which the Van Allen belts are, I still say, are a huge thing about communicating. Ever since I read that article from MIT on them trying to incorporate the communications into a laser and all of the other testing from the Terrasat ones that was never launched. And that's only at 500, 800 miles they were trying to communicate because there's already enough interference with the ionosphere just between satellites. And then you realize that all of a sudden they discovered 10,000 kilometers of plasma, and we know what plasma does to communications. And nobody can answer that. I have looked and looked and looked for any documentation to discuss that further from NASA or any other universities, and it's not there.
There's a lot of stuff that's not there.
And if that is the case, then you can't have even an unmanned orbiter around the moon sending back photographs. It has to be able to fly back to send that information. It has to go there and come back with that information. And of course, when you start looking at the entire race for power in the 1960s, because it had nothing to do with the moon, it was a race for power and military might.
Yeah, control the high ground.
When I don't see any documentation on communications, is because they weren't interested in that. They were only designed, like, those rockets were military purpose rockets, and the only guidance system they needed were within the Earth's atmosphere. That's all they were interested in doing with those rockets. And that's all they still are doing with those rockets.
It's a sad case that we believe so much of what we're told because we have no means of criticizing it. We don't have the information. But now we're getting the information because other people and other nations are doing it or trying to do it based on what NASA have allegedly achieved. And they're finding the great holes in the story.
Well, the thing is, they are proving that we are right every day.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Because they can't do it. And it doesn't matter what nation, nobody has been successful at doing anything with good, valid documentation, right? And every day they don't do it proves that we were right and have been right. Even if they do it now, it still doesn't disprove us. If they suddenly accomplish it now, we're talking about 50 years ago when it didn't happen and it's not happening now. And if tomorrow they figure out how to do it, it still doesn't make 1969 a fact.
But NASA are doing their very best, aren't they? They've now named the Artemis crew, but they haven't got a rocket to send them up in.
Well, I wonder if they've got the Felix and Paul Studio book for them or not.
Oh, they probably will have, yes.
They do the ISS. I think they're going to end up taking these boys down to Downey. They got to wait for that to finish.
Have NASA reported repairing their launch tower yet? You know, when they launched Artemis 1, it virtually destroyed the launch tower.
No, that's what I was looking for. And then all I see that they're tearing down the mobile launch pads.
Yeah, a bit short-sighted, seeing as the Artemis rocket has to go out on a mobile launch.
They did say that they were constructing one for the SLS. It was designed separately. It's still in functioning order. But the other launch pads that were used for the shuttle and for the Apollo, like the Saturn V, those are being dismantled. What's interesting is they can call that a success at every turn, saying, well, we learned something new. Sure you did. It didn't work.
Like, don't do it that way again.
It doesn't give even an indication of what the problem is to be solved at that point, because they can't go back and see any of it. It's gone. They're starting from scratch again, right?
What about the Russians? I don't know if they use water. I thought they just used a chamber, that directional chamber like they did. I mean, you know, the ones the Russians have they look very similar to the V2. You know, that trench that they had down there that deflected the flame?
Yeah. The V2, because it was a mobile launch facility, they could move it around. It was quite a small rocket, the V2. It only weighed about 25 tons. So they could move it around on trucks. And when they launched it, they had underneath the rocket this sort of cone-shaped device to deflect the rocket exhaust away, which is a similar principle to what NASA uses to divert the rocket exhaust away in the flame trench. It's the same principle, it's just a bit bigger. But that came from the V2 launch, where they had this cone-shaped device under the rocket to deflect the exhaust away.
Yeah, but if you see Musk's design, he's got everything elevated way up above an open space in there where the rocket's sitting. I guess he thought he had enough space there for it to move away from the rocket and everything else. But as soon as it sat there for 7 seconds, it just disintegrated everything, right?
Well, in 2018, they were supposed to have 3 of those, and they were supposed to be taking 200 to 250 people, go up, come back down. It saves you the airplane ticket. The only problem is you're purchasing a one-way ticket to the grave. Okay, let's say they take 200 people per ship. I mean, that's still a lot of weight. That's a lot of body parts to be flying over a city. The funny thing is that when you look at the graphics, what they were trying to sell, what that saleswoman was trying to sell, I mean, the pads are only a mile away from the city. They're right there on the ocean. They're right there. So, which means if something goes wrong, you're going to have rocket parts, body parts, fuel that hasn't caught on fire. I mean, and fuel that is on fire. It's going to be spraying all over the city, coming right down on you.
It would be a huge problem if some of those rockets go off and kind of turn sideways and shoot along and then blow up, right? They could go right over top of the city. No problem. I mean, at least they had the forethought in Florida to put it right out where they put it, far enough away, and it's also already on the corrective angle so that if anything goes wrong, it's over the ocean, right?
Oh yeah, and you look at that concrete that goes through the car. You know, I slowed it down frame by frame. In one frame, the concrete actually hits the ground first and then deflects up and takes out the back window. I thought it went right through it. No, it hit the ground and went right up on an angle and right into the back of that window.
But why would somebody park their car that close to a rocket launch? Makes no sense.
Well, no, look at the trucks that were destroyed too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that was a little too close to his launch pad.
There's people on the other side of that little island there that are watching it. They're filming it right across there. Now, what is that, 3 miles?
Could be.
You know, it's hard to hear the rocket from where they are. And unless, of course, that could be their audio, but...
Probably their audio got destroyed the same way the rocket did.
I know the methane is a lot quieter, but I'm sure that they're well up into the highly dangerous zone when you're anywhere close to it.
Yeah, because it's the rocket exhaust going through the atmosphere that you're hearing.
Yeah, that pulse you get as soon as it's traveling faster than the speed of sound, which it's expanding much faster than that, right? And you get that. That's why they claim that they can never actually record the sound of a rocket taking off accurately.
It's like people saying that you can hear what the astronauts are saying as they take off in the Apollo rockets. Well, they're just 300 feet from the engines.
Yeah.
Don't you think there would be a little bit of noise intrusion? Doesn't matter that they're up in the air. Sound travels all over.
Well, then these guys will say that, oh, have you ever sat next to a jet engine in a 747 on the wing? You don't hear the engine. Well, sure, you hear a little rumble, but you don't hear the engine. And this is the same thing that they're saying. But yeah, this is not a rocket engine. This is a turbofan. This is a JT9D turbofan engine, not a rocket that's got 5 million pounds of thrust coming out of it.
You mean, are people actually comparing the Saturn V rocket to a 747 jet?
Yeah.
They're saying you can't hear the jet, therefore you couldn't hear the Saturn V.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are these guys coming from? What education have they had?
When you're on the ground, you can sure hear them when you're in the plane.
Yeah, of course you can.
It was Cornelius Crew that came up with that one.
Oh, he's desperate. Desperate.
Yeah.
Just shows how much attention he's paying to the videos you're posting, Robert. That he has to come up with a criticism of everything to desperately try to ensure that NASA's story is maintained. It's a bit sad, really. That's the only thing they can come up with. After my little discussion with Peter Bassett, I knew he was a member of a local astronomy group in Kent, where he lives. And I suggested that I come and do a presentation there, and he could then tear me apart in public. And he refused. He refused to do that. It would have been very easy for him to show me up if he thought I was wrong. But then I would have been asking questions as well. But the fact that he refused to even suggest to his chairman that I was a good person to have as a presenter. I've done it many times to astronomy groups. I always get a good reception, but not on this occasion. Peter Bassett's astronomy group is obviously to be protected against people like me, who obviously don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, didn't you say you didn't have the proper credentials?
That's right, yeah. I didn't have the right knowledge. The knowledge I'm supposed to have is that I will repeat NASA's PR projections that they landed humans on the moon. And if I then say that they didn't land humans on the moon, and this is why, and there are various reasons why they couldn't and didn't, I'm obviously not talking from the same hymn sheet. It's not singing from the same hymn sheet, which is a bit sad, really. Anyway, so thanks, Peter. You've exposed the problems that NASA are facing.